Yo, what's going on, everybody? This is Nothing But Bangers, aka MBB, aka I am MBB, aka Bangers. And I've got a huge video today telling you about Pokemon Pocket tournaments, how I would prepare for them, some different deck lists that I would choose. But I wanted to get you an update that is very important because we've already had one tournament that's gone down. I'll talk about those results as well, but I want to kind of show you what's going on with this kind of independent creator, and they're kind of hosting their own tournaments. There are prizes. There's no entry fee right now, so it's something to definitely keep an eye on, and it might help you kind of scratch that competitive itch if you've been trying to get a little bit more spicy and competitive with Pokemon Pocket. Now, there is a Discord. It's got the details of the tournament in here as well, and it is already full. There's already a wait list, but there will be more tournaments in the very near future, and this tournament's going to go down October 12th on a Saturday, so you can assume that potentially there may be another tournament the week after that. But I will go over some of the rules and some of the things that will help you get prepared for tournaments in Pokemon Pocket that may be hosted by this same vendor. So let's get into the details here. But here are the rules of this tournament, and then I'll kind of show you the results of the other tournament. But the rules of this tournament are: it's 6 rounds of Swiss. It's going to cut to top 8 single elimination. It's going to be best of 3. The finals will be a best of 5. Now, there's no bans. There's one deck that you bring. There's a 45 round time limit. And no slow playing on purpose, which is obviously a little subjective, so you got to kind of look at that. I don't know how they're going to judge that, but that's a whole nother topic. The prizes: $40 US, $25 US, $15 US, and $10 US. So I'm guessing that top 4 there will be like a third place game or third place match is what I'm guessing. But there are the details of the tournament. Now, the one thing that I do want to kind of highlight real quick is there's already been a tournament, like I mentioned. I believe it happened last Saturday, and the tournament winner played Pikachu GX with Voltorb and Electrode. Second place, they played a water deck, which was Articuno mixed with Greninja, and then third place played Marowak and Sandslash. So that's also really interesting. And again, I'll talk about the decks that I would potentially bring, and hint at the top 3 decks that you just saw. But let's get into some details. And if you want to learn more about these tournaments, definitely subscribe to my channel because I will be covering them. And then also they are on Reddit as well. There's like a ranked leaderboard that they're trying to do as well. But let's get into my tips for how I would get ready and play in this tournament. So starting off very basic, the first thing that I would want to do in preparation of this tournament and in preparation of any tournament with Pokemon Pocket is, one, I would want to know the rules in terms of what's the end of match procedure. Like if we go into a 45-minute time and it's a draw, what happens? We would want to know, what happens at the end of the 45 minutes. How do I register? And then, how many minutes are in each round? Because this is going to kind of help me kind of navigate that, oh man, we've only got 5 minutes left. What's going to happen? And for this particular tournament, it's important to know, this is why it's important. If it's 1-0, you won game 1, and we're going into game 2, and the game is taking really long for whatever reason, and 45 minutes hit, even though I'm 1-0 in this match, it's going to end in a draw. And that's very important because, as sad as it may say, and again, this is a very popular strategy in real life trading card game tournaments as well, but sometimes taking a draw is going to be more advantageous than taking a loss. So you may, find different ways to stall out in the match, not with slow play, but trying to stall out the match in terms of putting out beefier Pokemon if you notice that time is getting lower and lower. Now, there's also another strategy where you could play a deck that just that has the option to stall. That's a thing in Pokemon trading card game as well, stall. Obviously deck out's not a thing in Pokemon Pocket. And then one other big important thing to know, in order for a game to end in a draw in Pokemon Pocket, like forget the tournament, is if it goes 30 turns. So that means if each person takes 15 turns, the game automatically ends in a draw at the end when it gets to turn 30. So keep that in mind. Like, that's something not a lot of people know, because not a lot of people take that long in a game. But sometimes games turn into grind fest, and you definitely want to be aware how that works. But again, know the rules, no registration, so that way your deck list is submitted on time. And then another big thing is to know the rules of when other people's deck lists are going to be submitted. That's huge, because you want to be able to know the meta. And if everybody's submitting their deck list ahead of time, and you can wait till the last second, that can help you choose, what deck you want to submit. So very big tips there. So my second tip in order to prepare for tournaments and Pokemon tournaments with Pokemon Pocket is I would make sure that my devices are charged and that I have everything that I'm going to need for the tournament. The worst thing that can happen is you disconnect in the middle of a game you are about to win. And, that could really put a damper on the rest of your tournament chances to actually, qualify into the top cut. So I would make sure that I have my devices charged. I would have drinks ready to go, snacks ready to go. So that way you can stay, with enough ammunition for your body as well. Like, one big thing in going to long tournaments in real life is bringing snacks, bringing water. That way you can kind of recharge. You may not have time in between rounds to fully, have a meal ready to go. So again, just snacks, having your devices charged, having your equipment ready to go, potentially, hey, put that phone on Do Not Disturb, put that device on Do Not Disturb so nothing pops up. And then, hey, being prepared to record your matches so that way you can also, have something to go back and watch if needed. So very important tips here. Let's move on to some more important tips in terms of actual preparation for playing. So my third rule of preparation for tournaments in Pokemon Pocket would be to know your opponent's deck list. This is going to help shape your game plan and allow you to take different lines that you normally would not be able to take in playing in ladder matches. So when you queue up in ladder, when you queue up in just random verse on the app, you really don't know your opponent's deck list, and so you're kind of playing in the dark. Now, sure, you may be able to guess some cards in their deck, but by having my opponent's deck list, I am able to exactly know what's going on in their deck and potentially in their hand if the game turns into, there's only 0 cards left in deck and they have 3 cards in hand. So let's just pull up a couple of examples. So in this particular matchup, let's just say that this is my opponent. They're playing Fire Water, okay, for whatever reason. And I look at their deck list, and the first things that I'm going to notice is, number one, they don't play red card. Why is that important? That means I can feel free being as greedy as I want, using all the Pokeballs in my deck, using all the Professor's Research as I draw them, and that's going to allow me to take a greedier line and seeing more of my options. Now, you might be wondering, well, why does that matter? Well, the people that play red card, they may wait for you to Professor Research. They may wait for you to, use things like Caterpie and then use cards like red card. Now, another big takeaway in this deck list that I'm looking at is, oh, wow, they play double Sabrina. So I need to always be aware that, hey, if they've used one Sabrina, they still have another. And because, again, Sabrina can be used to stall, it can be used to win the game. It's a very flexible card. So those are 2 cards that I definitely want to look for in my opponent's deck list because they're going to potentially change the way that I approach the game. And again, the last point that I would make is by looking at your opponent's deck list, you may be able to target certain Pokemon on their bench. Let's just say they only have 1 Pokemon on their bench and you have Sabrina. Well, by looking at this deck list, I know that if I knock out that Charmander early in the game, they have 4 dead cards in their deck, 2 Charmeleon and 2 Charizard. Why is that important? Because now they have more dead draws, and I know that I've cut off their biggest attacker in the deck. And it's also important to know by cutting off that Charmander, the only way that they can use fire energy is now with Moltres. So if they start drawing a bunch of fire energies, the only attacker that they can actually use is going to be Moltres EX, because again, Starmie EX is going to need water energy. So it's very important to look at your opponent's deck list, to know your opponent's deck list, have it pulled up on another screen have it written down, whatever, but have your opponent's deck list handy. And that kind of goes with the, other tip that I gave about having your equipment ready. So that way you can be ready for whatever your opponent could potentially have in their hand or in their deck. So one more thing that I want to make sure that I highlight as we go into, potentially you getting ready for a tournament on Pokemon Pocket is to know the top decks in the meta. Now, it's pretty widely consensus right now that two of the best decks, two of the top decks are Pikachu and Zapdos EX. And then also it's going to be a Misty deck with Articuno and Starmie EX. Those are typically the two biggest decks. And because of these two decks' popularities, it is two matchups that you need to know and you need to have play tested against. So what do I mean by that? In my opinion, if you're testing for a big tournament or a tournament in general, you need to know the matchups of the best decks in the format. And it may not be the best. It may just be the most popular. At the end of the day, these two decks may end up not being the two most powerful decks in the meta, but they are easily the two most played decks in the meta. Because of that, I would want to know how my deck operates against both of these matchups. And from there, I can kind of figure out what I want to play. Do I want to counter these decks? Do I want to play a deck that beats both of these decks or one of these decks? And again, how do you do that? Well, take a look at just two random deck lists that I just happen to search and find. So when I look at this Misty with Articuno and Starmie EX deck, the first things that I notice is they have double red card, double Sabrina, and double potion, as well as double X speed. So they're going to be able to retreat very easily. They're going to be able to heal, so I need to be aware of that. They're going to be able to disrupt me with Sabrina and red card. This is a very standard list that I would probably want to make sure that I have games of experience against, because it's going to really help me understand, hey, do I even have a chance to win this game? Do I have a chance to win this tournament? Because maybe I played 20 games against this deck, and in testing, I won 70, 60% of these games. So I kind of know my matchup. I know what cards to look out for and what cards to, hopefully play against this deck in order to stop it. Now, when it comes to something like something like an electric deck with Pikachu EX and Zapdos EX. Well, when I look at this deck list, the first thing that I notice that kind of stands out is, hey, they're playing Potion and Giovanni. So this might be something that I need to account for. I might need to have games where I play against this deck, and I need to be aware if my opponent is playing a list like this. I need to be aware of that Giovanni. But again, you need to be aware of the matchups of some of the most popular decks in the meta, because if you can't beat these decks in testing, it's probably not a good idea to bring that deck to a tournament. So again, you don't always have to play meta decks, but it is something to be aware of, like, hey, can I beat this deck in, what if I play 10 games against this deck, what's my record against it? And the more sample size you can get, even the better. And again, just looking at this deck list, the first things that I notice is two Sabrinas, right? But I also notice a lack of red cards. So I can know against a deck like this, I'm not going to be as, I'm not going to be as scared of something like disruption from my hand, but I would need to be aware of things like Giovanni and Sabrina. So again, some of these tips do blend together, but again, playing and testing against these different deck lists of the most popular decks is going to help you understand the matchup, and hopefully that helps you whenever the tournament gets started and you sit down in front of a deck that is something that you tested against. Now, what about other decks? It's good to get games against them as well. It's good to know your Blastoise EX deck matchup. It's good to know your Venusaur matchup. It's good to know, your Charizard matchup. All sorts of matchups. It's the more testing you can do, the better prepared you're going to be, because you'll know, hey, in testing, my matchup wasn't so great against this deck, so I might need to be more risky in my play style, right? I might need to go for the gamble a little bit more. I might notice in testing that if I knock out this basic Pokemon, it puts me ahead in this matchup. So I might need to try to target this Pokemon with my Sabrinas. So different things to take away from your testing in preparation for tournaments. So you might be wondering, what decks would I bring if I was playing in this tournament instead of covering it and trying to go ahead and, talk about the results? Well, I've already posted content about some of the top decks. You should definitely check out that video. It'll pop up at the end of this video, but it goes into more details about an electric shell and a water shell. Now, currently looking at my card pool, this would probably be the electric deck that I would lean towards in playing in this tournament. Now, a lot of people will not like the Electabuzz, but I will tell you that there is flexibility in this list. Obviously, in my opinion, the 18th, 19th, and 20th cards in the deck are the potions and the Electabuzz. I think outside of that, the deck is pretty standard in what it does. It's going to bring in Raichu as a finisher. It's going to try to start the game with Zapdos or Pikachu. It's only playing 6 basics, technically 8 if you count the Pokeballs. Lieutenant Surge is just great in terms of a finisher in combination with Raichu. And when you take a look at Red Card is a great disruptor for Stage 2 decks, as well as for people that are just playing Professor's Research on turn 1 and then passing with 5 or more cards in their hand. It also punishes people for playing cards like Meowth and, going above that 4 and 5 card hand limit that you would want to look for to try to get an advantage with with Red Card. It also punishes people that are playing cards like Pokedex. Like I've had games where people will I'll red card them and then they'll draw their 3 cards and then go to 4 on their turn and then they'll play Pokedex. And I'm like, hey, great. So not only did I lower your hand size, I also gave you a card like Pokedex that is also another -1 for you. So again, Red Card, you're going to have scenarios where, hey, your opponent just happens to draw good cards, but you can't know that. The thing about Red Card is you want to put yourself in a position to win. And how am I putting myself in a position to win? I'm hopefully getting a card advantage whenever I shuffle their hand back. And also, I'm hopefully using Red Card after they've already used some draw power, after they've already used an attack that's maybe Caterpie or Meowth that's kind of tried to fix their hand. And hopefully I'm able to take that tempo and continue putting pressure on them with cards like Pikachu EX and Zapdos EX. Sabrina, just a great card, win condition, or a stall tactic. Another deck that I would potentially bring just based on, the card pool and resources. And again, there's debate on whether or not you would play double Staryu. Some people would only play one. In my card pool, I think I actually only have one Starmie EX. So I would probably put in an Articuno here, just a regular Articuno. But if I was playing water, this could potentially be my list. Again, just standard Articuno EX along with Starmie EX, the double Misty, the double Sabrina, the double Red Card, because again, I'm just a fan of Red Card for many, many reasons. Double Potion to try to extend the life of my attackers, because there will be time where Potion is going to mess with your opponent's math. Could you play Giovanni? I mean, sure, it might be your thing. I don't know. Maybe you like the math and you're testing. Maybe it's Giovanni is better than Potion in some of the matchups that you've tested against. But again, it's just a sample deck list that I would potentially be bringing to this tournament. And it's pretty standard, right? It's pretty standard. Now, the last deck that I would potentially bring to this tournament would be something like a Marowak EX. Now, you may be wondering, why the heck would you bring this deck? It's very straightforward in what it's trying to do. It's trying to chip damage with Sandslash or finish off Pokemon with Sandslash. And it's trying to potentially knock out Articuno EX, Pikachu EX, Zapdos EX, or most other EXs by using Marowak EX and flipping 2 heads. Now, there's a little bit of kind of question as to whether you would play double Sabrina or double Giovanni or one of each. Now, that's strictly up to you. I found myself wanting one Sabrina in a lot of matchups, and obviously the Giovanni can be nice in some matchups as well, and then in some matchups it's just not needed because you're one-shotting everything already. Some people may not like Red Card, so they take out the Red Cards and now they're able to play double Sabrina, double Giovanni. However, the issue with that is now you're playing a lot of supporters potentially that could put you in a little bit of a rough spot where your hand size is really big and you get red carded. Now, How can this deck compete with Pikachu EX and Misty deck? Well, you're gonna probably need to roll 2 heads with Marowak EX at some point or another. But the thought process behind this deck is, if you're flipping heads, you're probably going to win. And this may be a bit of a budget deck choice as well, because some of the other decks do play multiple EXs, whereas this plays just 2 EXs in Marowak. So again, it's a little bit of an anti-meta change, an anti-meta deck. You will have rough matchups with decks like Venusaur, just because, there's some of those Pokemon that can really put you in a big bind, where your Sandslash may be really, really glassy compared to some of the grass attackers because of that weakness. But again, I think that you can do well with any of these 3 decks. And in my opinion, I would not be surprised to see any of these 3 decks win or just take up all the top 4 spots of the tournament. So those are my picks for the tournament. I hope you enjoy the content, and I hope you stay tuned for more videos that are popping up at the end of this, and maybe check those out as well.